there's a short life in
Why do you think that is? What the creative side is?
Well, because losing out money, you got to take. You're going through so much to try and deal with life.
Moved to New York City, and I lived with Sean Puffy Combs for a year.
That's the crazy thing.
If you thought you knew everything about the glitzy, larger-than-life world of Sean Diddy Combs, brace yourself, because this is about to get stranger, darker, and much more complicated than anyone could have imagined. For years, whispers have followed Diddy's every move, painting a picture of a man whose public persona, polished, ambitious, untouchable, might be hiding shadows that even his brightest spotlight can't erase. And if there's one relationship that stands out as particularly baffling in the context of these rumors, it's the one he allegedly shared with a young Usher Raymond. Yes, that. Usher Raymond, the multi-platinum, chart-topping voice behind some of the most iconic music of the 2000s, what seemed at first to be a mentorship story, one celebrity reaching down to lift up another, now seems to point towards something far more unsettling.
Right?
No, not really. I mean, but hey, it was curious. I got a chance to see some things.
Yeah, but you were 13. What were you seeing?
I went there to see the lifestyle.
Rewind to the 1990s. Usher was just a teenager when Diddy took him under his wing, promising to shape him into the star the world would come to know. At the time, this seemed like a dream come true for the young artist. Diddy, already a towering figure in the music industry, had the golden touch. He was the man who built Bad Boy Records, who turned artists into icons, who knew exactly how to craft hits that would dominate airwaves for years. Usher was eager, wide-eyed, and ready to soak up all the knowledge that Diddy could impart. But the environment Diddy allegedly introduced him to, that's where this story takes a turn that nobody wants to believe. The story goes that Usher was sent to live with Diddy during his teenage years as part of an informal mentorship program. On the surface, this arrangement might have seemed harmless. An industry veteran showing a rising star the ropes, opening doors, and giving him a taste of what success could look like. But it's the details of that arrangement, the ones that have surfaced over the years in interviews and anecdotes, that have people raising their eyebrows. Usher himself has hinted that his time under Diddy's roof was anything but ordinary. In a now infamous interview clip, Usher casually recalled how, as a minor, he was exposed to a lifestyle that most adults would find overwhelming. He spoke about attending wild parties, being surrounded by high-profile figures, and witnessing behaviors that he, even as an impressionable kid, recognized as extreme.
I didn't say that.
Okay.
I didn't say that. What I did say is that there were very curious things taking place, and I didn't necessarily understand it.
And here's where things get even murkier. In a resurfaced interview, Diddy himself made comments about Usher's time living with him that came across as strange, to say the least. With a grin that seemed more mischievous than nostalgic, Diddy joked about their shared experiences, describing situations that left viewers squirming in discomfort. There was an odd energy to it all. Something about the way Diddy described those years felt off, as though he was towing a line between humor and something else entirely. At one point, he even quipped about waking up with Usher, a comment that has since been dissected and re-examined by fans and critics alike. Was it just a poorly phrased joke? Or was there something more to it?
That's my brother right here from day one. We used to wake up and, pause, but like, check this out.
That it doesn't stop there. Over the years, Usher has made cryptic statements that, while never explicitly detailing anything inappropriate, seem to hint at some level of unease about that chapter of his life. He has referred to those years as a learning experience, a diplomatic phrase that, in hindsight, feels loaded with subtext. What exactly did he learn? And at what cost? Critics have pointed out that Usher's rise to stardom coincided with a period in his career where he seemed unusually guarded, as if he was carrying the weight of something he couldn't or wouldn't share. Adding another layer of intrigue is the fact that Usher has maintained a professional distance from Diddy in recent years. While they've occasionally crossed paths at industry events, gone are the days when the two were seen as close allies. Some have speculated that this estrangement might be linked to the alleged dynamics of their earlier relationship. Others suggest that Usher, now a father himself, might have a different perspective on the guidance he received as a teenager. Whatever the reason, the apparent distance between the two only fuels the rumors.
Stevie J, the Usher part, that's a touchy situation, man.
And speaking of rumors, let's not overlook the whispers that have emerged from within the industry itself. Over the years, several insiders have hinted that Diddy's mentorship style was far from conventional. These allegations suggest a pattern of behavior, a tendency to blur the lines between professional and personal to create environments where boundaries were not just crossed, but outright ignored. While these claims remain unverified, they paint a picture of a man whose influence and power made it difficult for anyone to say no, let alone a young artist desperate to succeed. But perhaps the most chilling aspect of this story is the way it fits into a larger narrative about Diddy's alleged control over those in his orbit. Usher's experience is not an isolated incident. It's part of a pattern that, if true, speaks to a deeply troubling abuse of power. And while Usher has remained relatively tight-lipped about the specifics of his time with Diddy, others have been more vocal. In the wake of Diddy's recent legal troubles, former collaborators and associates have come forward with their own stories, painting a picture of an empire built on manipulation, exploitation, and fear.
Look at Diddy, for instance. Let's take a look at him. Let's take a look at, he has videos. He has videos of the parties. Now, what I've heard, which I don't know how much of it is in mainstream media, I don't really follow the story that much, but what I've heard from friends that are attorneys, friends of mine that have represented me before, agents and so on, is there's a bidding war going on.
So what does this all mean for Usher? For years, he has managed to sidestep the darker aspects of this narrative, focusing instead on his music and his family. But as more details about Diddy's alleged behavior come to light, it's impossible not to revisit Usher's early years and wonder what really happened during those formative years, and how much of it has shaped the man and artist he is today. This story isn't just about one man's rise to fame or another man's alleged abuses of power. It's about the cost of ambition, the sacrifices made in the pursuit of success, and the systems that allow powerful figures to operate unchecked. And if the allegations surrounding Diddy are even partially true, then Usher's story is just one piece of a much larger, much darker puzzle. But the deeper you dig, the more you realize that this isn't just about Usher. It's about an entire industry that seems to thrive on secrecy, control, and the exploitation of the vulnerable. And as the curtain is slowly pulled back on Diddy's world, one can't help but wonder, how many more stories like this are waiting to be told? How many more lives have been shaped or shattered by the choices of one man? And just how far are people willing to go to keep those secrets buried? And if Usher's story is one piece of a much bigger puzzle, then the frame holding that puzzle together is Diddy's alleged manipulation of those around him, particularly the young, hungry artists who entered his orbit. This wasn't just about mentorship, it was about control. A kind of psychological chess game where Diddy always played the king and everyone else was a pawn. Their moves predictable, their fates decided before they even stepped on the board.
Is that I'm quite likely to tell the whole truth and nothing but the truth, so help me God.
Take the stories that have emerged from other artists who've been in Diddy's gravitational pull. Katt Williams, never one to hold his tongue, has dropped bombshells over the years about what he claims to have witnessed in the industry. He's thrown out accusations that paint a picture of a world where power wasn't just leveraged in boardrooms or recording studios. It was wielded in much darker, more personal ways. Williams has openly alluded to secretive gatherings, to smaller, locked-door meetings that were anything but professional. And the most chilling part, he didn't just imply these scenarios existed, he claimed to have receipts, evidence, proof that the industry's most powerful figures, Diddy included, weren't always the polished moguls they presented themselves to be.
All lies will be exposed, that's all. And anyone who takes that the wrong way, know why they take it the wrong.
But it wasn't just Katt Williams raising red flags. Enter 50 Cent, a man who has built a career on confrontation, not just in music, but in life. He has been relentless in dragging Diddy's name into the mud, but not without reason, or at least, not without detail. His claims, while often laced with humor, have an undertone of something much more serious. He's recounted moments that made him deeply uncomfortable, interactions that seemed to blur the line between friendship and something far more calculated. For 50, it wasn't just about what Diddy said, it was about how he said it. The offhand comments, the strange invitations, the energy that seemed to shift the moment you got too close. And when you hear 50 Cent talk about these moments, you can almost feel the unease in his voice, as if he's still processing just how strange it all was.
So that's just competitive energy.
Competitiveness. All right, so you and Diddy, you and Puff cool?
No, I don't really rock with him
okay,
like that.
damn, all right. I didn't know what that meant. Then. All right, okay.
But perhaps the most damning stories come from artists who were less established, who didn't have the clout or the confidence to push back. The Game, for instance, has hinted at a complicated dynamic with Diddy, one that seemed to go beyond the typical artist-executive relationship. There were whispers of personal favors being exchanged for professional opportunities, of blurred lines that left more questions than answers. And then there's Method Man, whose name has been dragged into these allegations through stories of unsolicited advances and power plays that seemed designed to humiliate or coerce. These aren't stories of mentorship. They're stories of manipulation, of power dynamics so skewed that the artists involved were left questioning their own agency.
Interestingly, we haven't seen the indictments yet. There's been some time lag. I suppose it will take some time to go through all the forensic, evidence.
And it's not just men who've been caught in the web. Meek Mill's interactions with Diddy have also come under scrutiny, particularly a moment captured on video where Diddy's behavior seemed unusually intimate, even for close friends. The clip, which went viral for all the wrong reasons, shows Diddy congratulating Meek in a way that many found unsettling. It wasn't just the words, it was the tone, the body language, the sense that there was more happening beneath the surface. And when you pair that with other stories of Diddy's behavior at his infamous gatherings, it starts to paint a picture that's hard to ignore. These gatherings, by the way, are almost a character in the story themselves. They've been described as legendary, as the stuff of industry folklore. But the more you hear about them, the more they sound like something else entirely. Former associates have spoken about the way these events were structured, about the levels of access that determined whether you were part of the show or part of the audience. There are tales of younger artists being brought in under the guise of networking, only to find themselves in situations that felt anything but professional. And then there's the question of what happened behind closed doors, in rooms where cameras weren't allowed, and where the only witnesses were those who knew better than to talk.
I'll tell you, I don't know how much, I don't like to say things that I know unless I see it. That there's a little difference, but was it discussed? Was there descriptions from people I know that were at those? Yes, but here's another thing. So how many of these big entertainment parties and over the years and everything, with as successful as you are, have you been around? Does anyone ever come up to you at a certain hour and say, okay, it's time to go? At those parties, they did.
But what about those who did talk, only to be silenced just as quickly? Over the years, there have been murmurs of confidential settlements, NDAs, and abrupt career disappearances that seem to coincide with falling out of favor with Diddy. One former artist, who asked to remain anonymous, reportedly walked away from a lucrative deal after refusing to play the game. They later described the chilling aftermath: phone calls that stopped overnight, blacklisting from producers they'd been working with for years, and a sudden cold shoulder from industry insiders who once called them family. And that's the thing. Diddy didn't just hold the keys to success. He held the power to lock the door and throw them away if he saw fit. And yet, there's a sense that even Diddy's allies weren't completely safe from his influence. Take the curious case of his former business partner, who reportedly parted ways after a heated argument over finances and control. While the split was officially labeled as amicable, insiders claim the fallout was anything but. Rumors swirled that personal photos and messages were mysteriously leaked online just days after the disagreement, sparking whispers of Diddy's alleged retaliation tactics. Whether or not he was directly involved remains speculation, but the timing was suspicious enough to raise eyebrows. It's stories like these that fuel the idea of Diddy as not just a mogul, but a master manipulator, someone who played the long game and always came out on top.
Don't trust nobody. In Hollywood specifically, when you get there, a lot of people don't know how to say no. That's the difference between New York City and California.
And speaking of manipulation, consider the role of loyalty in Diddy's world, a loyalty that, by all accounts, wasn't earned but demanded. Former staffers have spoken about the unwritten rules of working in Diddy's inner circle, describing a culture of fear and submission. One individual recalled being reprimanded for simply looking too relaxed during a meeting, their demeanor interpreted as disrespect. Others have detailed scenarios where they were pushed to their limits, running errands at impossible hours or being berated for minor mistakes. For those who stayed, the rewards were immense, but for those who pushed back, the cost was even higher. It's no wonder so many chose to stay quiet, even when they saw things they wished they hadn't. But not everyone stayed quiet. Diddy's former bodyguard, Gene Deal, has come forward with stories that add even more weight to the allegations. He's recounted moments that he claims to have witnessed firsthand, moments that left him questioning not just Diddy's behavior, but the entire culture of the industry. Neal's accounts are detailed, specific, and most importantly, hard to dismiss. He speaks of artists being put in compromising positions, of power being used not to uplift, but to control. And when you listen to him talk, you get the sense that this isn't just about one man. It's about an entire system that allowed this kind of behavior to flourish.
I've lost businesses because I don't bend over in that way. I don't compromise. I don't play roles. I don't kiss a man. I don't do that because the man card means everything.
And then there's the question of why. Why would someone like Diddy, a man who seemingly has it all, feel the need to exert this kind of control over others? Is it about power, ego, some twisted sense of validation? The answers aren't clear, but the patterns are. Time and time again, Diddy has been accused of crossing lines, of using his influence in ways that seem less about mentorship and more about domination. And the more you dig, the more you realize that these aren't isolated incidents. They're part of a larger narrative, one that implicates not just Diddy, but the entire ecosystem that enabled him. So where does this leave us? With more questions than answers, certainly, but also with a sense that the stories we've heard so far are just the tip of the iceberg. Because if there's one thing we've learned about Diddy, it's that his world is layered, complex, and full of secrets. And as more people come forward, as more stories are told, it's becoming increasingly clear that those secrets might not stay buried for much longer. But what do you think? Is Diddy's empire built on talent and ambition, or is there something darker at its core? And if these allegations are true, what does that say about the industry that allowed it all to happen? Let us know your thoughts in the comments, and as always, stay tuned. This story is far from over.